Ethan was 35 years old, a man known in his small U.S. town as the kind of mechanic who could fix anything with patience and his bare hands. His garage was nothing special, oil stains on the floor, old tools hanging on the wall. But it was where he poured his life into every broken engine, every sputtering motor. He wasn't wealthy, but he had something far greater, the respect of the locals who trusted him. They often joked that Ethan could bring a dead car back to life, but no one imagined his skills would soon be tested in a way that would change everything. That morning, as Ethan worked on a dented pickup, a sleek black car pulled up outside his garage. From it stepped Victoria, a 32-year-old CEO of a powerful manufacturing company. She was dressed in sharp designer clothes, heels clicking on the concrete, and her expression was filled with frustration. Her company's main production machine had broken down, halting operations and costing her millions by the hour. Engineers and specialists had already failed, and as a last resort, she had been told about Ethan, the small-town mechanic with impossible talent. Victoria looked around the shabby garage with clear doubt in her eyes. She barely believed this. Humble man could do what experts could not. With a sharp, sarcastic laugh, she tossed out words she never expected to matter. "If you can fix that machine, I'll marry you myself." The workers who had accompanied her chuckled, treating it as a ridiculous joke, while Ethan only looked at her calmly. He didn't laugh. He didn't boast. He simply nodded and agreed to try, not because of her challenge, but because something in him refused to leave a problem unsolved. When Ethan stepped into the factory, the broken machine loomed over him, like a sleeping giant. It was massive, a steel monster of gears, belts and wires that had brought an entire production line to its knees. He studied it in silence, ignoring the whispers and smirks from the workers who doubted him. Hours turned into a full day as Ethan's hands worked tirelessly, tightening bolts, rewiring panels, and cleaning out years of neglect. Sweat ran down his face, oil stained his shirt, but there was a determination in his eyes that silenced even the loudest skeptics. By nightfall, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Victoria, arms crossed, watched closely. She had expected failure, but something in Ethan's quiet focus unsettled her. Finally, with a sudden metallic click, the machine roared to life. Belts spun, wheels turned, sparks shot, and the deafening hum of industry filled the factory once again. Workers gasped in disbelief and then broke into cheers. The factory floor, silent for days, was alive again. Ethan only wiped his greasy hands on a rag and looked up, his face calm, as though this had been just another job for him. Victoria stood, frozen. She had spoken her promise in jest, never imagining it would come to this. For the first time in years, her confident voice faltered. She approached Ethan, her heels echoing against the floor, and searched his face for pride, arrogance, or greed. But there was none. Ethan simply said in a steady voice, "I don't need your marriage, I just want your respect." His words cut through the noise of celebration, striking her deeper than she expected. In that moment, Victoria realized this. Mechanic was nothing like anyone she had ever met before. The morning after the machine had come back to life, Ethan returned to his quiet garage, slipping into his usual rhythm. To him, the previous night had been nothing more than a test of patience and skill, something he had been doing his whole life. But across town, Victoria sat in her glass-walled office, replaying every moment in her head. For a woman who lived in a world of contracts, mergers, and people constantly trying to impress her, Ethan's calm refusal of her joke struck something she couldn't ignore. She had never met a man who cared so little for money or power. Victoria decided to visit Ethan in his small garage. She arrived without her entourage, driving herself in a modest car instead of her usual luxury vehicle. Ethan was bent over a rusted sedan, sleeves rolled up, grease staining his arms. For the first time, she saw him not as a mechanic, but as a man who carried himself with quiet pride. She stood in the doorway, awkward in her designer clothes that felt out of place against the smell of oil and iron. "Why didn't you take my offer seriously?" she asked. Her voice trembled more than she wanted it to. Ethan looked up slowly, meeting her eyes without hesitation. "Because marriage isn't a prize," he said softly. "Respect and love can't be bought or promised in a moment of frustration." "What you said, it wasn't real." His words were simple, but they cut through her polished armor. Victoria laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You really are different," she admitted, though she wasn't sure if she was confessing it to him or to herself. Standing in that messy garage, she felt a vulnerability she hadn't known in years. As they talked, Ethan's young nephew, Sam, wandered in carrying a school project he had left in the garage. The 12-year-old boy beamed proudly as Ethan helped him fix a small wooden frame. Victoria watched as Ethan knelt beside the child, patient and encouraging, guiding his small hands with steady kindness. It was a small moment, ordinary and quiet, but it struck her harder than the roar of any machine. For years, Victoria had surrounded herself with people who wanted things from her, yet here was a man who gave freely without expecting anything in return. Days turned into weeks, and Victoria found herself visiting the garage more often. Sometimes she brought her car, sometimes she brought nothing but questions, lingering, just to hear Ethan's steady voice and the way he explained things. The townspeople began to notice, whispering about the glamorous CEO spending time with the humble mechanic. But Ethan paid no mind to gossip. He lived simply, with no care for appearances, and Victoria slowly learned to breathe in that simplicity. She found herself laughing more, listening more, and realizing how much of life she had missed while chasing power and wealth. One evening after closing the garage, Ethan found Victoria waiting outside, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. She looked nervous, her hands clutching the strap of her bag. "That night at the factory," she said quietly, "I made a promise as a joke, but now I'm starting to wish it hadn't been one." Ethan was silent for a long time, his gaze steady. Finally he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "If you're looking for someone to admire you for your wealth, I'm not that man. But if you want someone who will respect you for who you are, maybe we have something." Victoria's eyes softened, and for the first time she felt tears sting her lashes. She had built an empire, but in front of Ethan, she felt human again. The mechanic who had once been just a last resort had become the man who showed her a life beyond contracts and titles. In that quiet street, under the fading glow of neon lights, Victoria realized she had found the one thing she had never been able to buy: genuine respect and the possibility of real love.